Psychological toys that we refuse to put away, part 3. And we are looking at the contrast effect. The contrast effect is when one thing that you are examining or analyzing is affected directly by your recent exposure to something opposing to or different from what it is you're looking at right now. This one we have to take our time with to see how common it is and how ancient it is and how long it's been in our presentation, because the words don't really reveal to us themselves alone just how prevalent this toy is and how much we really enjoy it. Say a person just recently got out of a bad relationship. Say it was physically abusive, psychologically abusive, emotionally abusive, verbally abusive, and domineering and controlling, and ran as a prison. And then they shake out of that relationship and they meet somebody that's not so bad, but has some of the same attributes, some of the same qualities, and exhibits some of the same behavior. But they don't hit them. They don't slap them in the face. They're not being told where they can't go and who they can't hang with no more. Nobody's cheating on them anymore. Like, compromise is so common inside of the presentation of what it is that we've been calling life. But this is going to be a strong statement. I don't care. If there is compromise inside of what it is that you've been calling life, it is actually death. But your dictionary has been played with. You've been told that death is when you go inside of a coffin, and that coffin is lowered into the ground and you're buried 6 feet under. You have been told that life is a series of compromises leading up to a compromised existence. And what's funny is a compromise, by definition, is an agreement made by two parties in dispute, reach from making concessions. So when you compromise within yourself, who are these two parties? Nah, don't act like I'm talking crazy. When you are compromising within between the recepts of your imagination, when you are listening to the legion of voices deliberate back and forth and hand you illusion after illusion that you examine for value, who are these two opposing parties that are needing a compromise to solve the dispute at hand? Now, that's just where you got to stick with me. There is only one party in reality. All individuals are a part of one body. We all have the same source. We all have the same origin. Though we hold different beliefs, we are all of the same nature. We go by different names, but it's because we're all one species. But the kicker is we don't live in reality. We live in the imaginary fields that we create in our head that harden into fact and seep out into our physical experience by our perspective and our broken lenses that we view life through. Don't mess around and go flat. Don't mess around and get broke, because you just may find yourself fine and dandy with a day job that provides you with $16 an hour for every 60 minutes that you give them. You may find yourself perfectly fine trading your time for crumbs because you have compromised, because you used the contrast effect and you remember them days when you couldn't even go buy you nothing to eat. You remember when you was flat and your friends was going to hang out and you had to fall back and pretend like you didn't want to go because you couldn't afford to go. And you were afraid to recreate those days by attempting to follow the purpose and the ideals that are divinely deposited within inside of yourself. So you compromise and you find yourself on jobs that you hate, with people that you dislike, and doing things that you don't even enjoy because you use the contrast effect to make something that didn't make sense to you. Listen, the day that you realize that you do not do the smart thing, you do not do the wise thing, you do not do the most common thing, you don't do the most advised thing, you do whatever feels right. You have always followed your feelings. You have always done whatever felt right, whether it was wrong or not. If somebody punched you in the face and you felt that they deserved to be punched back, or you didn't deserve to be embarrassed to that degree, then you punched them back in the face because that's what you felt was right. If you ran, it's because you felt that you were outmatched, outmanned, or an alien wherever you got punched. So you ran. You have always followed what you felt was right in the moment, But how often have you took time to assess a moment outside of the intoxicating emotions that roller coaster ride in at the mere hint of an issue or the mere hint of something exciting happening? There's a saying that comparison is the thief of all joy. The contrast effect is nothing but dressed up and decorated and disguised comparison. That's all it is. Comparison leads to compromise because compromise is birthed from desperation. Desperation comes from the ignorance of not knowing that all belongs to my Father. So all has been inherited by the Son. Abundance principles, the belief in lack, things like this keep us inside of the contrast effect where we think that we can assess the value of what is in front of us by the trauma that is behind us. Oftentimes we do this. Oftentimes we don't have the car that we want. We settle for the car that's better than our last car. We don't have the house. We didn't even go after the house that we see ourselves in our imaginations. We went after the house that was a little better than the last one, or had a landlord that was a little nicer than the last one. We compromise at every turn because it's what we're taught. I remember the first time that I went public with what I wanted to be as a child. And I don't tell this story as some type of indictment to my parents. I tell it to show the way that the program is given to us at a very young age, that recalculation, overthinking, and self-guessing is definitely necessary and needed when you are approaching the progression of your purpose and design, when really all of these things can only lead us away from our purpose and design because they are all born of the illusionary ego, and therefore all are lies and non-existent. But just like the boogeyman in the closet, if I believe in it, it creates such a fear in me that it appears or seems to be real. When I was a kid, I didn't say I wanted to be an NBA player. I didn't say I wanted to be an NFL star. I didn't even say I wanted to be a rapper. That's not what I said first. The first thing I went public in my household and said as a kid was I wanted to be an architect. But when I said that, it got some LOLs out of the people who were a little more knowledgeable about what that job would entail. At the time, I was a C math student, and I did not know from playing The Sims, where I learned to enjoy the process of developing architectural structures and building structures from my imagination. The 3D models and the blueprints and all of those things were things that attracted me. But I didn't know that under all of that was a ton of math. But my family did. So they laughed at me and they told me I should probably pick another profession. And after they told me that, I began to tell myself that, to the point that I'm 30 when I even had a recollection that I ever had the dream in the first place. It was the contrast effect that I used to pick my next field of interest because it had less math in it and it was less of a demand on my ability to solve equations and write them. So back to that. If in reality there's but one party, who is the other party that's involved when we are compromising within ourselves, listening to the legion of voices deliberate back and forth, trying to find value in the illusions that they present? None other than the false version of ourselves that we create within ourselves based on the core values and beliefs that we develop from broken paradigms as we experience traumatic and triumphant experiences throughout the course of our time upon the physical plane. You're tired of having the same experiences over and over again, and moving to another city is not going to solve that, because until you change your thoughts, you're going to have the same experiences no matter where you take your body. Until you change the way you think and you change the way you feel, every relationship that you try to cultivate with another person is going to ultimately become what you hated about the relationship with the last person that you connected with, because what you hated about that relationship was not a reflection of the dysfunction that that other person carried solely. They were a outward picture, a mirror reflecting back to you the inner chaos that you embody and that you encompass. And if you chose to get away from that person and to run from that person, then you will run right into another person that carries those same qualities, and you will have to pass that class. You do not get to run from the master teacher, because the master teacher is yourself, the great I am that abides within each and every one of us. So until you find a way, like many people have spent their lives trying, to escape or evade moments with yourself, you're stuck with the teacher, you're stuck with the lesson, and you're going to keep repeating that class until you pass that test. If there is no belief in the ego, or there is no partnership with the ego, then there is no second party for there to be the need or desire for a compromise to be made. You've partnered with your ego in the past because your ego speaks a language that you're familiar with. Your ego speaks lies. Your ego speaks illusions. Your ego speaks deception. Your ego misleads, misguides, and mismanages you. Your ego is abusive. Your ego is a tyrant. Your ego is everything that you are familiar with about being connected to the people that you have chose to be a part of your experience upon this plane. The ego is very easy to partner with because the ego offers us what is familiar. It offers us what we know. It offers us the chaos. It offers us the anxiety, the rush. Many of us say that we hate, but many of us seem to seek out and are not satisfied until we find. But I am speaks a language that we are not quite so familiar with. I am, the inner self, speaks a language that we've long forgotten. It speaks an ancient language, truth, nothing but the truth. But we've forgotten the truth, and we only recognize the truth by a inward nudge that many of us don't know how to recognize, because our confidence in ourselves has been shattered or replaced by the confidence of an outward savior that existed thousands of years ago and completed an act that completed my salvation but left me to complete it as well. Lock in.